In the third year of selling soybean curd to fund Rowan Lee's Imperial examinations, he still hadn't passed the scholar's exam. To pay for his tuition to study under famous masters, I sold soybean curd day and night without rest. To buy the ancient books he wanted, I reluctantly pawned the jade bracelet my mother had left me, watching him grow dejected after years of failure. I hesitated repeatedly, should I go to the capital to beg my powerful birth father to recommend a good position for Rowan Lee, but when I delivered soybean curd to a brothel, I accidentally heard noble young masters chatting with Rowan Lee. I wondered why the young master would willingly stay in this poor place. Turns out he's hiding a beauty in a golden house. Aren't you tired of pretending to be a poor scholar for 3 years? Your father is urging you to go back and marry the county lord's daughter. I calmly took the 3 copper coins from the courtesan, bought paper and ink, and wrote a letter. Father, you've always wanted me to enter the palace as a concubine. I agree, you're only fooling that country girl. A young master shook his golden fan, his tone dripping with disdainful mockery. Even the scholar's exam has 3 stages: county, prefecture, and provincial. You leave in the morning and come back in the afternoon every time. What kind of exam is that? Amidst the laughter, Rowan Lee lazily lifted his eyelids. She's just a country girl, she doesn't know any better. She believes everything I say, utterly stupid. An even louder burst of laughter erupted. Behind the priceless red sandalwood screen, I clenched the shabby wooden bucket containing soybean curd so tightly that my knuckles turned white, my ears buzzed. As if I'd been punched hard in the chest, all the soybean curd I'd made with bloodshot eyes, all the silver I'd gotten from pawning my mother's heirloom at that moment, they all became nothing but a casual stupid from Rowan Lee's mouth. Young Master Lee is truly skilled, another young master drawled intentionally. Getting a girl to support you willingly, this skill is far more impressive than passing the top scholar's exam. Rowan Lee picked up his teacup and took a sip, his tone lazy. It's just a pastime. A bowl of soybean curd only costs 3 copper coins. Watching her struggle to earn those 3 coins at a time for me is quite entertaining. You're having fun, but it's hard on us brothers. Your father has asked us several times if you're in Yujo. He must have clues. Be careful, he sends troops to drag you back to marry. Rowan Lee fell silent for a moment. I'll return to the capital next month. What about your soybean curd girl? Are you taking her back? A country girl becoming a concubine in the general's mansion is already a great favor to her. Just leave her some money. She's just a poor nobody. Even if she finds out the truth, what trouble can she stir up? The men chattered on. But this time, Rowan Lee fell silent for a long time. He seemed to say something, but his voice was too soft, drowned out by the sound of silk and bamboo music. When the song ended, the courtesan holding a peeper lifted the curtain and walked out. Seeing me still standing at the door with an empty bucket, she curled her lips in disdain and threw a few copper coins at me, chasing after 3 copper coins, desperate for money. No, excuse me, miss. I bowed my head lower and lower, my voice hoarse. The young master sitting in the upper seat inside, who is he? The words young master tasted bitter on my tongue. I could barely get them out. The courtesan glanced at me contemptuously, her tone lazy. You know Prince Huainan. Right, that's his son, the youngest top scholar in the dynasty. He's hiding here to avoid marriage. I heard he's been with a soybean curd seller from around here. The courtesan suddenly widened her eyes, staring at me dumbfounded, unable to speak. I wiped away my tears and forced a smile. Please, miss, don't tell the people inside that I was here. The courtesan fell silent for a moment, then cursed, Bah, all men are heartless bastards. She roughly stuffed her handkerchief into my hand. Don't worry, I won't say anything. Wipe your face and leave quickly. Hash 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 too. I stumbled back home in a daze. The soybean milk bucket I'd prepared before going out was still on the stove. The familiar scent of soybeans wafted to my nose, and the tears I'd held back all the way fell in big drops. 3 years ago, Rowan Lee had fainted at my doorstep. After drinking a bowl of hot soybean milk, he woke up quickly. He said he'd lost his memory and had nowhere to go, just like the big yellow dog I raised. He followed me around all day, but he was more capable than the dog. He chased away the local hooligans who came to collect protection money, and helped me carry the heavy soybean curd bucket. Perhaps life had been too lonely since my mother passed away. I let him stay. He said he didn't want to do hard labor to earn money, he wanted to take the Imperial examinations to gain fame. I said, "That's great. Studying is good, I'll support you." But he stared blankly for a long time, a complex emotion I couldn't understand flashing in his eyes. Then he hugged me affectionately and smiled. "When I pass the scholar's exam, I'll marry you, okay? We'll move into a big mansion together. You'll never have to get up early and stay up late selling soybean curd again. From now on, you'll make it only for me. When I become a great general, you'll be the most prestigious general's wife." As I picked beans from the wicker basket, I bit my lip and smiled shyly at him. I believed every word he said. Now, looking back, the amnesia was a lie, the scholar's exam was a lie, so marrying me was also a lie. When he said those words to me, he was always smiling. I thought he was happy. In reality, he must have been laughing at my stupidity, laughing at how easily I believed his lies, laughing at how I'd given him my whole heart without reservation. I knew that when you give someone your sincerity, you have to bear the risk of being let down. This outcome wasn't unexpected. But Rowan Lee, when you watched me being fooled by you, did you feel even a moment of guilt? #3. In the end, I couldn't bear to throw away the bucket of soybean milk I'd prepared. It was already late at night, but I was still bustling around the stove. So cheap, I mocked myself silently as I added firewood to the stove. The heat rose, and the soybean milk in the pot gurgled. The small, dark room was filled with steam. As I stirred the bottom of the pot with a spoon, I stared blankly at the furnishings in the room. On the low wooden table, there was a basket of sewing supplies and a stack of books that looked out of place in the whole house, the ones Rowan Lee studied every day. Through spring, summer, autumn, and winter, I made soybean curd while listening to him recite poems and texts. His voice was clear and melodious, and the verses sounded beautiful when he said them. Sometimes, when he got excited, he would explain the meaning of the poems to me, how the ancient people expressed their emotions through scenery, how they conveyed their aspirations through objects. I didn't understand much, but I listened intently, feeling both happy and regretful, happy that the person I liked was so knowledgeable, regretful that the examiners were blind and hadn't let him pass. But now, thinking back to the Rowan Lee I'd seen today, I only felt absurdity. Just a country girl, she believes everything I say. Next month, I'll go back to the capital to get married. Unconsciously, I remembered the indifference in his voice when he talked about me, and a sharp pain pierced my chest. I hesitated for a moment, and my arm knocked over the bucket, which tilted toward my arm. Hot soybean milk was about to spill on me when a pair of slender, jade-like hands suddenly reached out. Steadily holding the swaying bucket and placing it on the ground, the man looked at me with distress and feigned anger. "I told you I'd do these heavy jobs when I got home, why won't you listen?" Holding the wooden spoon, I slowly straightened my sore waist, looking at the man's furrowed brows as he worried about me. I suddenly found it extremely ridiculous. What had I done to deserve this? To make a noble young master willingly stay by my side, help me with menial labor, and act out 3 years of love with me? I spoke calmly. "Let's get married." The man with a face as jade-like as a crown froze slightly. He lifted his beautiful eyes and subtly declined. "We agreed, didn't we? Wait until I pass the scholar's exam." "But Rowan Lee," I interrupted him with a soft smile. "I can't wait anymore. I'm already 22, an old maid. I don't need a grand, wealthy wedding. A piece of red cloth can be my veil. And we can ask the village chief to witness our marriage. No guests, no greetings, just the two of us bowing to heaven and earth." These words had been hidden in my heart for a long time. I was willing to marry him. No wealth, no glory, just sincerity. If he said yes, I could forgive him for lying to me. But all I got in response was a sigh. Rowan Lee's long eyelashes fluttered shut, his tone calm. "Wait a little longer." Sarcasm and pain tangled in my chest. I was grateful for the thick steam from the stove, hiding the redness in my eyes. I forced a bright smile. "All right, then forget it, forget it. I was going home to marry someone else. I didn't want to like you anymore." #4. 3 days later, after selling soybean curd, I went to the post station to pick up my father's reply, but as I passed a restaurant, I unexpectedly saw Rowan Lee, who should have been in the private school studying, seated by the window. He still wore the cotton-padded jacket I'd sewn for him by hand, but beside him sat a young girl wrapped in a fox fur coat. The girl tugged affectionately at his sleeve, her eyes sparkling as she spoke. "Before coming to Yujo, I heard you'd secretly kept a lowly woman behind my back. I was so angry. But since you gave me such a beautiful bracelet, I'll forgive you." The girl held up a jade bracelet, admiring it in the sunlight. I froze in place, my feet as if nailed to the ground. That was my mother's heirloom bracelet. My eyes red, I watched as Rowan Lee smiled and brushed the girl's hair. The other young masters chimed in with laughter. "Exactly, Miss Shen. You're the only one in young Master Lee's heart. I heard this bracelet was the woman's mother's keepsake. Rowan Lee knew you'd been looking for this phoenix bracelet, so he managed to get it from her with great difficulty." I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood, barely holding back the bitterness in my eyes. I'd struggled to save enough for Rowan Lee's tuition by selling soybean curd. Then he'd looked troubled and told me he wanted a rare incomplete ancient book. If he didn't buy it soon, someone else would. That book cost 10 taels of silver, with soybean curd selling for 3 copper coins a bowl, even working day and night. I could never have saved that much. In my darkest moment, I'd sat alone clutching that bracelet all night. Early the next morning, I'd taken it to the pawnshop anyway, exchanging it for the ancient book Rowan Lee had been longing for. But now I knew, that book had never been that important to Rowan Lee. Born into wealth with a library of 10,000 volumes at home, he'd only wanted my bracelet to curry favor with his fiancée. The young master's flattery made Miss Shen's face darken. She snorted coldly and smashed the jade bracelet hard onto the ground. "I don't want that lowly woman's things. Disgusting." Crack. I watched helplessly as my mother's heirloom shattered before my eyes. My nails dug deep into my palms, staring at the shards scattered across the floor. I seemed to hear my mother's weak voice on her deathbed. "Keep this bracelet. Safe." I'd always planned to redeem it from the pawnshop once I'd saved enough money. Now, that last hope was trampled into dust. A strong metallic taste filled my mouth. I burst into violent coughs, my eyes red but dry turns out, in the depths of grief. Even tears refused to fall. Like a walking corpse, I numbly entered the post station, my hands trembling. I tore open the envelope. Inside were only a few lines. "At the ferry, a boat waits for you. Depart anytime." Rushing home, I packed my bags in a hurry. I gave all the useful, valuable things to the neighbors, and all of Rowan Lee's belongings to the beggars on the street. As the beggars left gratefully clutching the quilts and clothes, I turned coldly, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked step by step toward the ferry. #5. Yujo's weather was unpredictable. A sudden rain began to fall. In the private room of the restaurant, Rowan Lee frowned sharply. He glanced anxiously out the window. Daphne had gone out without an umbrella that morning. Pushing the cart with the soybean curd buckets alone, she'd surely get soaked. At the thought, he stood up abruptly. "I have something to do. I'll leave first." "You can't go," Xianxia snapped angrily. "You're just going to find that lowly woman. If you leave, I'll go tell Uncle Lee you've been keeping a woman in Yujo." Rowan Lee fell silent for a moment, then sat back down, but the unease in his heart grew stronger, like he'd lost something precious. "It's okay," he comforted himself silently. Daphne was so gentle-tempered, he could just make up an excuse, say the teacher had kept him after class to study. She wouldn't be angry. He rehearsed the excuse 1,000 times in his mind before returning to the shabby little hut late at night. The house was pitch black. Something was wrong. Before, whenever he hadn't come home, Daphne had always left a lamp burning for him. He pushed the door open in a panic. The house was silent, empty. Overwhelming panic flooded him in an instant. Rowan Lee's body went cold, his heart racing. Where was Daphne? Why hadn't she come back? Had she fallen in the rain, or met bandits? He rushed out the door, crashing into the neighbor aunt who was emptying night soil, abandoning all decorum. He grabbed her sleeve. "Have you seen Daphne?" The aunt looked surprised. "Daphne went home." Rowan Lee froze. "Her mother died long ago. She has no home left." "Me." "What nonsense." The aunt rolled her eyes, her tone sarcastic. "Daphne's young and easy to fool. But her birth father isn't someone to be trifled with. His daughter wasted so much time on a useless man, of course he's in a hurry. Daphne's father has already found her a wealthy family in the capital. He's called her back to get married. What? After a moment of stunned silence, Rowan Lee clung tightly to the aunt's sleeve, his eyes bloodshot. Married? His voice trembled with accusation. Did Daphne agree? The aunt pulled her arm free forcefully, annoyed. Yes, oh, and Daphne left you a message, she said. Rowan Lee, you don't have to lie to me anymore. #6, 20 years ago, the powerful Grand Tutor Xue was still a newly appointed third-place Imperial exam scholar. He'd come to Yuzhou to handle a case, accidentally ingested a forbidden drug, and forced himself on my mother, resulting in me. Afterwards, he'd wanted to take my mother back to the capital, promising her wealth and luxury, but never a legitimate status, for he already had a wife from a prominent noble family. My mother had refused outright. When she died alone in Yuzhou, I'd hated him. He'd ruined her entire life. Returning to the capital this time, I'd prepared to become the concubine of the elderly emperor, now over 60, but I'd never expected this. The grey-haired Grand Tutor Xue stared at me in silence for a long time, then suddenly spoke. Prince Yu, Gideon Wei, lost his mother at a young age and has weak foundations in the court, but he is intelligent and gentle, a good match. Father has high hopes for him. If he can ascend the throne one day, that's best. If not, Grand Tutor Xue paused. In his murky, calculating eyes, there flashed a moment of genuine remorse. With father backing you, Prince Yu will surely love and respect you. He won't dare to humiliate you. For what happened back then, I wronged your mother, and I wronged you too. This marriage is the only way I can make amends. I lowered my eyes, unsure how to respond to this sudden arrangement. My heart was a jumble of emotions, confusion about the marriage, and a faint touch of movedness that my father had planned for my future. But I had never met Prince Yu. Could we truly treat each other with respect and mutual affection in the days ahead? Countless thoughts swirled in my mind. Yet Rowan Lee's smiling face suddenly appeared before my eyes like a needle pricking my heart. I snapped back to reality, bowed coldly, and said, "Daughter will listen to father." #7. Grand Tutor Xue gave me a thick stack of silver notes, telling me to choose hairpins and jewelry at any shop in the capital. On my first visit, the shopkeeper stared at my face hesitantly and said apologetically that the golden hairpin I wanted was out of stock. But when I went again the second time, the shopkeeper respectfully led me to the back room. Confused, I walked in and saw a familiar figure standing with his hands behind his back. Rowan Lee, dressed in luxurious silk robes, stood by the window. He looked at me coldly, his brows furrowed with anger. I heard Grand Tutor Xue had recognized a daughter, but I never thought it would be you. We knew each other for 3 years, yet you never told me you had such a powerful birth father. Before I could defend myself, Rowan Lee continued, his tone brimming with accusation. Why didn't you tell me? If you had said you were Grand Tutor Xue's daughter, I would have taken you back to the capital to marry long ago. I wouldn't have had to struggle so much every day. I was dumbfounded, frozen in place. He was the one who had lied to me first, yet when we met again, he didn't mention an apology at all. Instead, he blamed me. Rowan Lee, I only lied to you once, and you're so angry and resentful. But what about you? Why didn't you explain that you faked amnesia? Why did you lie to me into spending all my money to support your studies? Why did you trick me into giving you my mother's heirloom bracelet to curry favor with your fiancé? Why did you call me a stupid country girl? No, listen to me. Rowan Lee's face turned pale, his voice trembling. In the capital, I'm used to people's coldness and snobbery. I did those things only to test if you truly loved me. I didn't know that bracelet was your mother's heirloom. I gave it to Xianxia just to make her happy, so she would agree to call off the engagement. I stared at Rowan Lee quietly, my heart numb. I wanted to say, Rowan Lee, stop making excuses. You have eyes. Couldn't you see how much I cherished that bracelet? Couldn't you see how tired I was from selling soybean curd to pay for your studies? You just didn't care. If only I hadn't foolishly saved you that year. Then I wouldn't have fallen in love with you, and I wouldn't have to suffer all this. The room was filled with cold silence. After a long while, I finally heard a soft "I'm sorry." I looked up and saw Rowan Lee gazing at me sincerely. Daphne, I'll go back and tell my parents I won't marry Xianxia. You tell Grand Tutor Shui you don't want to marry either. Okay, I'll definitely marry you. I suddenly found it ridiculous. How humble had I been before, that even now, Rowan Lee still thought a simple apology would make me cancel my engagement without hesitation, forgive him for lying to me for 3 years, and agree to marry him again. I interrupted him coldly. So what? You agreeing to marry me is your compensation. And I should be grateful. Rowan Lee looked stunned. What else do you want? During those 3 years in Yuzhou, I truly liked you and treated you well. I never asked for anything in return, nor did I covet wealth. Even if you had no fame, I still wanted to marry you. But how did you treat me? I said each word slowly. Rowan Lee, you want me to forgive you, don't you? All right, return my mother's heirloom bracelet to me, and I'll forgive you. #8. After that unpleasant encounter with Rowan Lee, I didn't leave the mansion again. Instead, I stayed quietly in the Grand Tutor's residence, preparing for my wedding. I heard that Rowan Lee had returned home and asked Prince Huainan to call off the marriage with the Shen family, but his father had severely beaten him and locked him in the woodshed. Soon, the day of my wedding to Prince Yu arrived. On the wedding night, I sat upright on the wedding bed, my fingers twisted tightly inside the sleeves of my bridal gown. It was impossible not to be nervous. I never thought I would marry a man I had never met. Until a scale was used to lift my red veil, amidst the matchmaker's joyful chants, I finally saw my husband. My anxious heartbeat suddenly skipped a beat. The bright red candles illuminated his face, handsome and gentle. I heard from Grand Tutor Shui that Daphne lived in Yuzhou before returning home. Gideon Wei sat beside me. There was a faint smell of alcohol on him, but I didn't find it unpleasant. I nodded awkwardly. He smiled and said he had been to Yuzhou too. Yuzhou has a simple folk customs, and the people live and work in peace and contentment. The street food there is not only delicious but also diverse. Yes, speaking of this, I finally found a topic. My eyes lit up, and I sat up straight immediately. Has your highness tried the sugar cakes from Ji's restaurant? 5 copper coins for 2, crispy and fragrant. They're my favorite. And Zhao's lamb soup, drinking a bowl in winter warms you up all over. As I spoke, I couldn't help swallowing. The matchmaker had said brides couldn't go to the latrine, so she hadn't let me drink a drop of water. Gideon Wei seemed to notice my embarrassment. The corner of his mouth curved up, and he ordered someone to bring food. He patiently answered my question. I haven't tried the sugar cakes, but I did have the lamb soup. It's the one at the city gate, right? The old man selling the soup is very kind. Knowing I was from out of town, he even gave me a fried dough cake. That's right. Uncle Zhao is extremely kind. Every time I forgot my umbrella on a rainy day, he would lend me his bamboo hat. I nodded vigorously. Suddenly, I remembered the past. Every time I told Rowan Lee about a new snack shop that had opened, or brought him hot sugar cakes wrapped in my arms, wanting him to try them too. But Rowan Lee, holding his books, had always been impatient. He didn't even glance at the sugar cakes I had worked so hard to bring back, only frowning and lecturing me. A gentleman keeps away from kitchens. I'm not interested in these things. Street food is dirty. I wouldn't eat it. I had thought Gideon Wei, who was more noble than Rowan Lee, would be the same. But he wasn't. Gideon Wei listened to me patiently, and even said he would go back to Yuzhou with me someday to try all the foods I liked. Daphne, I had finished the pastries on the plate, but Gideon Wei's gaze fell on my lips. He still had a smile on his face. But his gentle eyes suddenly turned deep. He leaned closer slightly, his voice low and slightly enchanting. You, I froze, feeling awkward and flustered. I quickly wiped the corner of my mouth hard. Did I get pastry crumbs on my face? I'm sorry for making you laugh. After hearing my words, Gideon Wei suddenly paused. But then he smiled softly at me again. It's okay. Daphne is so cute I wouldn't laugh at you. #9. Life in the prince's mansion was free and leisurely. Gideon Wei's mother had passed away when he was young, so I didn't even have to follow the rule of paying respects to a mother-in-law. With nothing to do, I simply ran to the kitchen to make soybean curd. Just as the soybean milk in the pot began to curdle, a clear male voice suddenly sounded from behind, startling me. What delicious thing are you making, Daphne? Gideon Wei walked into the kitchen, raising the corner of his mouth mischievously. It smells wonderful. Holding the spoon handle, I felt a little embarrassed. In private, Gideon Wei never called me princess, he always used my name. He even insisted, half coaxing and half forcing, that I call him Gideon too. The etiquette tutor had once remonstrated that this was inappropriate, but after thinking for a moment, Gideon Wei transferred her to manage the outer courtyard. Why, Your Highness? Seeing Gideon Wei raise his eyebrows, I blushed, hesitated, and changed my words. Gideon, I'm making soybean curd, would you like to try some? My heart was anxious, fearing he would disdain the simple food I made, but to my surprise, Gideon Wei took the bowl and smiled, saying it was delicious. What a coincidence, it's almost noon. The ministers discussing matters in the study must be hungry too. I'll take some to share with them. The study was packed with people. As bowls of soybean curd were passed around, the room was filled with fragrance. Before recognizing her birth father, my princess made a living selling soybean curd. Gideon Wei's clear voice echoed, her soybean curd is smooth and tender, quite famous among the neighbors. My lords, please taste it too. Husband and wife were one. Marrying a soybean curd seller might have made him, a prince, seem unvalued and lowly, but there was no trace of disdain or contempt in Gideon Wei's tone, only appreciation for my craftsmanship. Oh, as the prince of you said, this soybean curd is indeed smooth and tender, melting in the mouth, it's absolutely delicious, one minister exclaimed after taking a bite. Yes, yes, the princess of you is truly clever and dexterous, another echoed, how affectionate the prince and princess are. Hearing this, Gideon Wei's eyes lit up with a smile. My princess is still young and suffered a lot in the past, I must treat her even better. At his words, the ministers who had been whispering fell silent for a moment, followed by sighs of emotion. With the prince of you cherishing her so much, the princess will surely live a harmonious and happy life in the future, someone said. My face turned slightly red. I secretly glanced at Gideon Wei through the pearl curtain and found him looking back at me with gentle eyes. My heart suddenly softened, and a faint smile involuntarily appeared on my lips. I walked briskly along the corridor, planning to share the remaining soybean curd with the servants. But a familiar voice called out to me, Daphne. It was Rowan Lee. I froze. He was here too. I had been so focused on Gideon Wei that I hadn't noticed him. I knew it was you who made this soybean curd as soon as I tasted it. Rowan Lee stumbled back a step, his voice filled with sorrow and disbelief. No wonder you spoke so firmly that day, saying you would never marry me. So you've climbed a high branch, #10, in just 1 month. The gap between Rowan Lee and me had become insurmountable. Staring at the filigree phoenix hairpin in my hair, Rowan Lee's eyes turned red with hurt and resentment. Daphne, I always thought you were a good girl who didn't covet wealth. I never imagined you would abandon me without hesitation and marry someone else for the title of princess. Don't tell me you like Gideon Wei. You stayed in Yuzhou all this time, you didn't even know him. If he weren't a prince, if he were a penniless pauper, would you have agreed to marry him so readily? I stared at Rowan Lee quietly, a calm, faint weariness spreading in my chest. Young Master Lee, when I found you, you were also a penniless pauper, but I never looked down on you. Rowan Lee's face turned pale, then paler. That's not the same. He reached out to grab my sleeve, but Gideon Wei's voice suddenly came from behind. Rowan Lee, how dare you? You actually dare to pester my princess, possibly fueled by anger. Rowan Lee disregarded the difference in status and argued with Gideon Wei. Yes, she's your princess, so what? Daphne clearly likes me. We've been in love for a long time. If Grand Tutor Xue hadn't used his daughter to curry favor with the powerful, how could she have become your princess? A cold glint flashed in Gideon Wei's eyes. He stepped closer to Rowan Lee, his voice sharp. In love, Rowan Lee, don't pretend to be innocent. You spent 3 years with Daphne in Yuzhou. During those 3 years, if you had cast aside your worries even once and decided to marry her, how could Daphne have been so heartbroken that she chose to return to the capital? You keep saying you were in love, but what practical promises did you ever make to her? You never wanted to marry her or give her a stable future. now that she's my princess, you stand here spouting nonsense, don't you find it ridiculous? With each word Gideon Wei spoke, Rowan Lee's face turned paler. In the end, he stood stiffly in place, his expression bitter. Gideon Wei stood in the snow, his figure as straight as a pine tree. You looked down on Daphne for her humble background, thinking she would shame you, so you hesitated to marry her. You despised her for only knowing how to make soybean curd and not understanding poetry and books, so you deliberately deceived her and mocked her, but all the things you cared about are trivial externalities. You couldn't see that Daphne's most precious quality is her pure and kind heart. Gideon Wei stood protectively in front of me, staring coldly at Rowan Lee. Each word was firm and resounding. Rowan Lee, you have no idea what a wonderful girl you missed. Suddenly, a cold wind blew, stirring up countless snowflakes that stung my face. I bit my lip tightly, forcing back the bitterness in my eyes, but joyful tears still welled up. Mother, look, I've fulfilled your wish. I've married a good man. He doesn't belittle me, nor does he underestimate me. He sees my goodness and cherishes it. # 11. The snow fell harder and harder, covering Gideon Wei's shoulders with a layer of cold. It wasn't until Rowan Lee's figure hurried around the corridor corner and disappeared that Gideon Wei turned around. He took a handkerchief from his sleeve, bent down, and gently wiped my face. His tone held no blame, only helplessness. Why are you crying like a little cat? Be careful, your eyes are swollen and sore when you wake up tomorrow. Looking at his calm expression, I held back for a long time before finally saying awkwardly, so you knew everything? Yes. I've known for a long time that you liked Rowan Lee in Yuzhou, liked him so much that you sold soybean curd to fund his Imperial examinations. I froze, lowering my head in embarrassment. I'm stupid, aren't I? That's why I was deceived by him. My princess is not stupid at all, Gideon Wei said softly. His calloused fingertips gently brushed the corners of my eyes. He smiled, a smile that seemed to hold 1,000 words, yet all were condensed into that gentle touch. If you hadn't been selling soybean curd on the street to fund his studies, I wouldn't have tasted such delicious soybean curd when I was seriously ill that year. Perhaps I wouldn't have survived long enough to return to the capital. I would have died a long time ago. When Gideon Wei was 16, his mother passed away, and he was neglected by his father. His brothers, all from noble backgrounds, deliberately teased him, ordering him to rush to Yuzhou on New Year's Eve to retrieve a file. That year, the snow was even heavier than this year, swirling down, covering the entire world in white. Gideon Wei rode alone, struggling forward in the heavy snow. He finally reached Yuzhou early in the morning to get the file, but then developed a high fever from exhaustion and cold. His vision blurred, and he stumbled, almost falling to the ground. He barely managed to sit on a bench beside the city gate to rest, only to find that he had taken someone's stall. He stumbled to his feet, preparing to leave, but the girl called out to him. Perhaps his haggard, pale face looked pitiful, for the girl smiled and handed him a bowl of hot soybean curd. If anyone else had done this, it would have felt like an act of charity, wounding his pride. But there was no trace of sympathy in the girl's expression, only gentle warmth. She said to me, "Young master, Happy New Year, you're my first customer of the year. What a wonderful fate, I'll treat you to a bowl of soybean curd." She also said, "No matter how hard things get, as long as you're full, you can always find a way to solve them." After all these years, Gideon Wei finally had the chance to tell me this in person. He looked at me with bright eyes, as if a person walking alone through countless lonely cold nights had finally seen the light of day. In my stunned, disbelieving gaze, he smiled and hugged me tightly. That bowl of soybean curd was so fragrant. At that time, I thought, such a good girl who would be lucky enough to marry her. Thank goodness Rowan Lee, that fool, was blind. I got lucky and picked up a treasure. # 12. 5 years later, the emperor suddenly fell seriously ill. The princes resorted to every trick to compete for the throne, but no one expected that the one who would finally ascend to the throne would be Gideon Wei, the one they looked down on the most. With his humble background and gentle demeanor, after Gideon Wei became emperor, the first imperial edict he issued was to confer me the title of empress. With no other concubines in the harem, some ministers opposed it, and the Minister of Rights was the loudest among them. But all these objections were futile. Gideon Wei leaned on his forehead, smiling, and said that since he was already emperor, if he couldn't decide who his wife would be, he might as well give the throne to the Minister of Rights. In Gideon Wei's gentle tone and Grand Tutor Shui's dark expression, the Minister of Rights keenly sensed the danger. He shuddered, shrank his head, and clamped his mouth shut. On another day after the court session, Gideon Wei returned to my palace as usual, but this time, his face was cold and stern. Rowan Li submitted a memorial saying that the capital is a place of heartache for him. He volunteers to go to the border to fight the Xiongnu and achieve meritorious deeds. I was slightly stunned, but Gideon Wei had already hugged me tightly. His tone filled with resentment. It's been years, he still refuses to marry. Now he won't even stay in the capital. He must still be thinking about you. This jealousy came out of nowhere. I smiled helplessly and gently reminded him, Chenna will be back from school soon. When he comes, he'll say that you, as a father, are more childish than a 5-year-old. Gideon Wei nodded solemnly. You're absolutely right. I almost forgot about Chenna. With that, he raised his voice and ordered the eunuch standing at the door, don't let the crown prince in. Tell him to go to the study and memorize his books thoroughly. I'll check later. I was stunned, then laughed. I didn't expect he would take his jealousy out on the child. I patted his back lightly, pretending to scold him. Chenna is still young. How can he really memorize so many pages? Gideon Wei rested his chin on my shoulder, his voice muffled. It's his fault for being so close to you. As his father, I sometimes feel overshadowed. I was about to comfort him when Gideon Wei wrapped his arms tightly around my waist. He coaxed me pitifully. Daphne, I'm jealous. Won't you comfort me? Before I could respond, a warm kiss fell. After being married for so many years, Gideon Wei had grown older. But his personality had become more and more childish. I smiled and sighed softly, closing my eyes, and immersed myself in the kiss, wrapping my arms affectionately around his neck. Outside the window, snowflakes fell rustlingly, bending the branches, covering everything in white. Inside the palace, red candles flickered gently, and the wicks popped repeatedly. Every year brings cold snow, but fortunately, from now on, the person I love will always be by my side. The end.